Today we are going to be looking more in depth at amphibian life cycles as we continue on through our animal life cycles unit. I remember yesterday we talked really quickly about a frog life cycle, so we're going to look more in depth at the amphibian life cycles and the different amphibians that there are. Remember that you do not need to take notes unless you want to. There's also nothing to submit today on Class Dojo. There are some optional activities and videos and books at the end if you want to do a little bit more work. Otherwise, we're going to continue straight through. All right, let's go. So, what are amphibians? Now, we talked about an amphibian at the start when we did classification, which was before spring break. And what we learned was that they live the first part of their lives in the water and then the last part on land. So they start in the water and then they move to land. And the word amphibian actually means two lives. So the one in the water and one on land. So another interesting fact is that all amphibians have gills. Most amphibians have thin, moist skin that helps them breathe, especially on land. And amphibians are cold-blooded. And see if you can remember what cold-blooded means. So maybe pause the video, shout it out, tell mom and dad, and then come back. Okay? So cold-blooded, remember that humans are warm-blooded and amphibians are cold-blooded. And that means that they rely on their surroundings to control their body temperatures. So, like a reptile that lies in the sun, if an amphibian wants to get warm, it needs to be around warm things. So it will be in the sun, or it will go into warm water. If it's too hot, then it needs to go and cool down in someplace cold. Okay? So cold-blooded is when the temperature surrounding the animal controls their internal body temperature. So most amphibians like to live in or near water or in damp areas. And now you're probably wondering what amphibians are. We know that they're frogs, okay? But some other types of amphibians are toads, salamanders, and newts. So if you want a little bit more information on specifically amphibians before we start on life cycles, you can check out those videos. They talk about amphibians a little bit more. So if you want to watch them, you can, but you don't have to. Right? So all life cycles of amphibians basically start the same. So amphibians hatch from eggs. After they hatch, their bodies are still in the larva stage, okay? And in this stage, they are fish-like. So they have gills to breathe underwater and fins to swim with. As they grow older, their bodies undergo changes called metamorphosis, which is like when a caterpillar changes into a butterfly, and they grow lungs to breathe air and limbs for walking on the ground. So they change. So they change from the fish to a frog, okay? So we're going to look a little bit more at the different life cycles now. So let's go. So we're going to start with a frog, which we touched on yesterday. So the frog eggs will hatch within 3 to 25 days, but they will hatch faster if the water is warmer, okay? Then the young frogs are called tadpoles or pollywogs. I love that they're called pollywogs, and that is my new favorite word, and I want to use it all the time now, okay? Now, pollywogs, or tadpoles, have a tail, and they have gills, which they breathe through. So as the pollywog grows, you can also call it a tadpole, but pollywog is just such a better word. It will first grow the back legs and then the front legs or arm. So the tail will slowly disappear and the frog hops up to the land as an adult. Okay, and that's what we mean by metamorphosis. So it changes from the fish to a froglet, which is a teenage frog. Okay, so it goes from the tadpole, a better word is pollywog, okay? And from the pollywog stage, then it moves to be a froglet, and then it becomes an adult. So it changes from the fish, which is the tadpole or pollywog stage, and then it goes into a froglet, which is the smaller version of a frog, an adult frog. Okay? So that is what the life cycle of a frog kind of looks like. So before we start talking about toads, what is the difference between a toad and a frog? So toads have thick, dry skin, which is bumpy and brown. But frogs, they have thin, wet, smooth skin, which is a little bit more colorful. Although this picture you can't really tell, but a little bit. Okay? They both lay eggs in a chain. Okay? But a frog has a stout body type, which is a little bit bigger. And a frog has a slim body shape. Okay? A toad has short legs. A frog has long legs. A frog generally lives in water, but a toad lives on land. And how they move from place to place? Well, toads, I guess, walk, or they take short hops, but frogs jump, and they jump a lot. Okay? So hopefully that helps explain a little bit the difference between what a frog is and a toad. So now we're going to look at the life cycle of a toad. So toad eggs hatch in 3 to 14 days, and the same as a frog, they hatch faster in warmer water. Then they become a tadpole, and they grow for several weeks. And they also go through a metamorphosis, but they're not called froglets like the baby frogs. They are called toadlets. So just a little bit different. And then the little toads or toadlets grow rapidly and are adults in 2 or 3 years. So basically they go from being born, they are hatched, okay? And in a couple weeks, they become toadlets, okay? In less than 2 months, they become toadlets. And then they grow to be adults in 2 or 3 years, and the cycle starts again. So that is the life cycle of a toad. And just an interesting fact that I found on the internet, that if you look here, this is a picture of a penny, which is basically a small coin. If you look, it's like a fill in the UAE. And that is an actual toadlet on the penny. So it is so small that it can just fit on a penny. So if mom or dad has a little coin, or if you have a coin in your piggy bank, you can look, it's smaller than a dirham and it's like a fill. So it's super, super, super small. Okay, just imagine having a little tiny creature on that. So now we're going to look at the life cycle of a salamander. Okay, so salamanders normally lay about 100 eggs, and it takes about 30 days for the eggs to hatch. After 20 days after they've hatched, the salamanders will start to grow legs, and the same like a frog and a toad, the back legs appear first, but the front legs grow quickly after. Okay? When they are 60 days old, the young change to their adult shape. So they lose their gills, their tail fin disappears, so they basically become a small salamander. But again, just like the toad, it takes about 2 years before they are adults and the cycle can start again. So in 2 years, the eggs will become an adult salamander. All right? So again, before we talk about what the life cycle of a newt is, salamanders and newts are pretty similar, okay? So I wanted to just clarify what was different between them. So a salamander has dull skin, which is kind of boring, it's not colorful, whereas a newt has really brightly colored skin. So newts are probably a little bit prettier than salamanders. But salamanders have smooth, moist skin, whereas newts have bumpy skin. So salamanders are a little bit nicer to touch or pet if you ever get the chance. Okay, so those are just some of the differences so you can tell the two apart. But let's get going on the life cycle of a newt. So, different to a salamander, a newt lays 200 to 300 eggs, and the eggs hatch after 2 to 3 weeks. Okay? It only spends a few months as a tadpole or a larva, okay, which is the other word for tadpole. And then it becomes an eft. And the eft leaves the water and they live in wet areas before they become an adult. So the eft is like the word, like the toadlet or froglet. It's just a word for like a teenage or child's newt. All right. So if you want to look up a little bit more videos or just find a little bit more information, I have a awesome Dr. Binox. You know how much Miss Kay loves Dr. Binox. Life Cycle of a Frog. And of course, I had to include an Uncle Jack song, which is about frog metamorphosis. Okay. A lot of the information on YouTube is about the life cycles of frogs. Okay. There's not a lot on toads and salamanders and newts. So if you're wanting to know a little bit more, or if you want to do your own research about life cycles, you are more than welcome to, but there's a lot on frogs, so just be aware. There's also, I've included some optional life cycle activities. Again, it's very frog heavy, okay? There is a frog life cycle craft, which is using some things that you might have at home if you feel like you can do that. There is an edible frog life cycle, which uses some grapes and apples. So maybe you can try and make your own edible frog life cycle. And there's also a board game that you can play. You can make it and play it with your family. So those are some extra things that if you would like to do, you can, but you don't have to. If you do them, please take a picture and send it to me because I want to see if you've done it. I want to see what it looks like, what yours look like. Take a video of you playing the game. Do anything that you feel like, okay? So again, these are optional activities. You do not have to do them, but if you do, I definitely want to see it, okay? And the last thing that I have for you today is just some books that you can read or watch. So there's 2 read alouds that are on YouTube. Miss Kay doesn't have any frog books, sadly, at home. But I did find 2 about the frog life cycles. Again, it's very frog heavy. So you can check those out if you just want to like watch a story being read, or maybe if you want to try and pause the video and read it yourselves, that's fine. I also found on ReadWorks some stories, and they have some questions that go with it, and they're in your account. So when you log into ReadWorks using your login, which is in your home learning journal, okay, there are some stories that you can read yourself, and you can answer some questions to see how well you understand. Okay, there's also a very, very easy read on Raz Kids. It is, I believe, a level C, so it's super easy, but you are welcome to read that and to do the questions as well from there. If you log in, you can try and find some books about life cycles on frogs, okay? So again, just remember that there's nothing due today. There is the optional activities, okay? So the videos, the actual activities, and the books that you can read and watch. Remember that at the end of the week, we are going to be having a check-in to see what you remember from everything. So if you did write some notes, that's cool. Otherwise, you can have a look through again and just see if you know the different things. The important thing to remember about the life cycle of an amphibian is that they all hatch from eggs, okay? They start after they hatch, they're very much like fish, okay? And as they grow older, their bodies undergo changes called metamorphosis. So if you need to remember anything, obviously remember this. And a super big hint, because my new favorite word is polywogs, I feel like that will probably be on the check-in. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. All right? So have fun looking up a little bit more if you feel like it. Okay? Remember, there's a couple videos for you, some extra activities, and some books that you can read and watch. All right? So I'm looking forward to seeing if anybody does any of the optional activities. And remember, just send me a picture if you do. All right? Enjoy.